Hi, I'm Josh Wallace, and this is our very first MC Sask Shorts interview. I'm excited today because I'm with Dave Feick, who's the executive director of Micah, sometimes known as the Micah Mission here in Saskatoon. I'm especially happy because I've been a long-term board member and volunteer with Micah for the last 7 or 8 years. It's about as long as I've known Dave, and he's going to offer some reflections on living in pandemic from his context, from the work of Micah, and as he's following Jesus. So, Dave, I have 3 questions for you, and I'll start off with the first one. And it's about how COVID-19 has affected the people involved with Micah.
First of all, if people don't know what we do, one of the things is circles of support and accountability, particularly for people who have offended sexually and who do not want to harm anyone again. And so the way that COSA works is that several volunteers get together with the core member at least once a week and talk about how things are going and encourage him and help, and just to hold him accountable. And usually those are face-to-face meetings, often at a coffee shop. So you can imagine coffee shops aren't open, and those kinds of meetings aren't necessarily happening as they usually do, but certainly they've been able to arrange for them to happen over the phone, however, video chats, these kinds of platforms, and various other ways. Even sometimes, in some cases, it's just texting to keep going. But some of those core members and even some of our volunteers have been laid off, or and so there's those kinds of concerns as well. We also have a person-to-person program, which is how our organization really got started. So people visiting in the prisons, and again, that's not happening. People can't be going. There's no one is visiting in the prisons, not even family members, I think. And so we've encouraged people to write letters. And so far, I've had one person say that they've actually followed up on that, although she says the person that she's corresponding with or that she's been visiting with isn't very literate, so she doesn't expect to get a response back from him. A recent development with that, interestingly enough, is that one of the halfway houses invited us to do a person-to-person type of setting with a couple of fellas there who are older and don't have a lot of support in the community, and so they've made it possible for us to go in there, and as long as we wash our hands before and after and wipe the room down. We do also have a faith community reintegration project, and as a community chaplain working to help people get reintegrated into the community and certainly to connect them with the faith community. I have a very powerful example of how that's not working, in that we had a fellow come out on parole with the plan to go to a treatment center, but also to connect with a faith community. The faith community I had him connected with actually has a recovery minister. I don't know, there were a number of other things that fell by the wayside, and by the time he should have been calling the recovery minister, he was already on a downward slide, and unfortunately ended up using drugs again, and which was a breach of his conditions, and he's now back in prison again. So yeah, that's kind of how they're being affected by this whole thing. So
I hear that this season of pandemic, it both exposes some of our vulnerabilities as we feel isolated. It also exposes the need to find ways of connecting, even despite the complications, whether that be old technologies like sitting down and actually writing a letter, or new technologies like you and I connecting here over Zoom. That leads me to a second question. How are you seeing, or how could congregations be connecting with the work of Micah?
Well, a number of things there as well. Certainly, number one, pray for people in prison. Pray that, and for those who return to the community, and that they would all find the support they need, and certainly the resolve to take a path that is going to keep them from harming anyone, but also that they can find ways to be successful in the community. Another way is to volunteer. We're always welcoming volunteers. We're I mean, we do have a training process for the COSA program in particular, which we're still trying to figure out whether that can actually work online, which I think it probably can by this format as well. Even for our, our faith communities as well. I mean, they can, volunteer, get some people together, and I mean, if we could have congregations that would support people who are being released, we can also do a COSA type of training with any of the volunteers in that congregation too, and we can be preparing for when somebody does get out in the time down the road. And of course, we are thankful for those who are able to give financially to the work as well. And we've had a couple of donations come to us out of the blue, totally unexpected in this time of pandemic, and we certainly appreciated that. But yeah, maybe one other thing is to do that old-fashioned thing too, and you could write letters just anonymously to someone, send them to us here in the office, and we can forward those on. Letters of encouragement and so on. And
I like this idea of using some of the extra time that maybe we have right now as we're stuck at home or stuck far away from some of the people we'd usually be gathering with, and putting it to use in good ways, whether it's filling out paperwork or figuring out how to make monthly donations or writing letters to folks who could really use an encouraging word. Mm-hmm. That leads me to the last question here, Dave. What gives you hope in the midst of pandemic? Where are you personally finding hope in this season?
I'm looking for a silver lining in the clouds, right? I mean, we're all learning new ways to be in our world. We're learning how to communicate in this manner. I had a birthday party here not so long ago that I did by Zoom, and I had a pile of people in my dining room. It was great. So without the pandemic, I would have never thought of that. Hey, I could just have a Zoom party. But yeah, I mean, we do miss the personal face-to-face connections, but I think people are picking up on these ways of doing things. They're phoning, they're texting one another, they're doing Zoom and so on. I guess my hope is that good will ultimately overcome over some of the other things that are going on. I'm hopeful that this time to pause or to wait or whatever we're doing is kind of a reboot that's going to take us back to, how we were created or how we were born, and people to love one another. I think that's how we were created to be. And so yeah, even though there's plenty of things in the world happening that are negative, there are many more that give us cause to hope. And I hope that compassion will outweigh the negatives, and I hope that love will win out in the end, and that'll be the new normal, that people will find new ways to love one another and to care for one another, as they're already doing here during this time. So
let it be. Dave, thank you so much for agreeing to this interview. I'm sure your words will be encouraging and informative. Peace to you in this season of pandemic.